my name is Bernie Williams and this is That 4x4 Show. The theme of this week's program is sand. We will show you how to drive through sand, and then we'll also show you where you can find the sand to go and hone your sand driving skills. And I will also show you some of the pitfalls that you can experience in sand. But before we get to that, I get to drive two soft roaders and we get to see what do you get for your money. Its cousin is said to be the most popular SUV in all of China. Its other cousin competed in the Dakar Rally Raid and came 6th overall. And it sells for only 280,000 Rand, brand new. It is the latest GWM H5, and it's also a 4x4. Well, that is theoretically. But more on the 4x4 part a bit later. Let's first talk design. And in this department, the latest GWM H5 is, well, middle of the road. One certainly can't call it a work of art, nor can you accuse it of being particularly ugly. So it's functional and safe. It's all rather conservative and, dare we say, predictable. But that's maybe not a bad thing. Just look how well Toyota did with being predictable. Anyway, this Chinese lorry's biggest selling point is not its Naomi Campbellness. Instead, it's the value for money that really counts. It's really here in the interior where the value for money strikes you. And this is where you're going to spend most of your time in any case in the H5. You'd think that at the price, the Chinese factory would use curtain material for the seats, garden furniture plastic for the dashboard, and a steering wheel from a Massey Ferguson tractor. But it's not like that at all. No, it's not nearly on the same level as the top-end SUVs, but let me tell you, it's way better than you'd expect it to be at this bargain price. This includes an electrically adjustable driver's seat, dual-zone air conditioning, a snazzy infotainment system with a reverse camera, and plenty of Chinese cow for the interior. So you've got to say that so far it's looking pretty good for the H5. But will it continue in the same vein on the road? No, unfortunately not. This is kind of like driving a metro bus. At the lower end of the rev range, you have such bad turbo lag. But once you get the little 2-litre turbo diesel going and the turbo starts working, it's quite a different story. But unfortunately, dynamically, the H5 really fails to impress. Yes, it has a 6-speed manual gearbox, and yes, it has 110 kilowatts of power and 310 newton meters of torque, which is said to be available from 1,800 RPM. This all sounds just dandy on paper, but on the road, the numbers and the actual driving experience don't quite match up. The refinement, the turbo lag, the sloppy gearbox, and the steering feedback are adequate at best. Okay, so one has to place this in context with the price. Oh yes, and I almost forgot, this is actually a 4x4 as well. Yes, it is a 4x4, but curiously enough, GWM have decided to do away with the transfer case which was present in the previous H5 model. So now, by default, you have a rear-wheel drive vehicle, but you have a selector button where you can select all-wheel drive, thus giving you a 50-50 split between the front and rear axles, but in high range. Which is kind of weird. Because of the 50-50 split with a locked center differential, you can't drive it on-road in four-wheel drive. It's only suited to gravel and sand-type driving. This is mostly pointless if you buy this GWM because it's a 4x4 and you want to use it to drive through rivers and dongas and over rocks. Without any low range and any other traction aids like rear differential lock or traction control, the new H5 is therefore without a doubt a pavement special soft roader. Theoretically, the 4x4 button really kind of feels gimmicky. But can this 280,000 Rand pretend 4x4 really go the extra off-road mile? But more importantly, how would this compare with a similar 4x4? Like another SUV that has been labeled as a bit of a pavement special with a finicky 4x4 system. It's also a turbo diesel and it has leather seats and a reverse camera, just like the GWM. The only major difference is that Formula One world champion Sebastian Vettel drives one. Oh yes, and it's a little bit less affordable than the H5. Join us later in the program when we compare apples with, well, not apples. And now, sand. Whether it's Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, even here at home, at some point you're bound to experience deep sand in all your travels. Here are some of the problems that you might encounter when driving in thick sand. Driving on sand can be intimidating, but it can also be pretty cool and loads of fun. But there is sand and there is sand. We get different kinds of sand. The kind of sand you find here is almost like a dry riverbed. And this kind of a sand you could get away with about 1.5 to about 1.2 bar tire pressures. Going to the Kalahari, your red dunes, it's even more difficult to traverse the dunes, and the sand, I reckon about 1.2 bar as well. The Namib Desert, on the other hand, I would recommend you go down to about 0.8. But why should I deflate my 4x4 tires? What does that help? Let me explain with a drawing in the sand. If you have perfectly inflated tires, okay, that would be more or less the profile that you would see, and that being your surface. Okay, so that's more or less your contact patch that you will have. So now if I deflate my tire, my profile is going to look slightly different, and please forgive me, I'm not Picasso. So this is more or less what it's going to look like. So I get a bit of flotation, it's almost like a railway line over here. But the moment I deflate my tire, please remember, you are not making the tire wider. What you are in effect doing is you're making the footprint longer, giving you better traction in the sand. And that's what you need. You need flotation. You need to basically stay on top of the sand. That is why we deflate tires in the sand. So that's the theory. Let's get practical about it. We've now gotten to a place where we can't go any further. All right, so what do? I now engage low range, and for better traction, and I need to start building myself a road. How do I do that? I can't go forward, but however, it's possible to move backwards, even if it's just by 2 or 3 centimeters. So I start going backwards as far as I can, stop, go forward again as far as I can. Then I go back again. You'll find every time you go ever so slightly further. Okay, and all the time stay in the track that you're building. And now we've got ourselves a nice little hard road to drive from, and I can get a little bit more momentum. So off I go. There we go, on our hard track. Easy, climbs out like nothing. Something else that's very important when driving in sand, and you need to stop. Let the vehicle roll to its own stop. Do not brake. The moment you hit the brakes, you're actually building a wall of resistance in front of the tires, and you're making it more difficult for yourself to pull away again once you need to move on. So look what happens when I hit the brakes hard. The car almost manages to dig itself back in. Now, when I want to pull away, I got a problem. Okay, so what do I do now? Now I've got to go back again in order to get over that little wall that we've just built ourselves. I go back, and I come again, and I drive through that little sand wall. There we go. Some people say that a 4x4 is not necessary to drive in sand, and that with a 2x4 with a rear diff lock, you can get just as far as a 4x4. In theory, maybe yes, and that is if you are without a trailer. But it's a different story when it comes to steep slopes, sand dunes, and even dry riverbeds. Let's find out. Now, some guys believe it's an absolute myth that you must engage four-wheel drive in a dry riverbed or in sand for that matter. And of course, guys being guys, it's an ego-driven thing. You buy a 4x4 to see how far you can go in two-wheel drive. What's the point? Let's see. I'm now in two-wheel drive, and I'm going to switch the traction control off just for that added little bit of momentum that we can get. And let's see how far we get in two-wheel drive in the sand. So let's switch off the traction control. And here we go in two-wheel drive. Not very effective. We're not really going anywhere fast. Ain't working. Let's try the same exercise, and now we are in four-wheel drive. See how much easier it is. So, why would you want to struggle in two-wheel drive when you can do it so easily in four-wheel drive? I mean, really? So, the moral of the story is simple. If you've got 4x4, use it. The mechanical toll on your vehicle and the impact on the tracks you spin on, well, it's just not worth it. So, where do you find sand to drive in? Here's an idea for you. The 4x4 Community Forum guys often organize a river trip. And here you will have plenty of opportunity to hone your sand driving skills. And of course, plenty of guys will be on hand to help you should you get stuck. With all this talk about sand, we now bring you, well, more sand. Every year, the lads and girls from the 4x4 Community Forum head down to the town of Giyani in the Limpopo province. The adventurers normally meet up at the Arte Coffee de Eiland on the banks of the Letaba River, about 70 kilometers east of the town of Tsanin. This is where our hosts Marius and Ben's dog Gimli camped the first night. Early the next morning, they headed down to a central meeting point where they met up with the rest of the crew of 5 Land Rovers, 2 Jeeps and a Toyota Land Cruiser. And this is now officially where the fun starts. The adventurers enter the mostly dry riverbed here and then follow the river for approximately 55 kilometers before leaving the sand and rocks behind, virtually a rock's throw away from the Kruger National Park. The plan of action is simple here: negotiate the soft and in places tricky sand, clamber over the boulder fields when needed, and sometimes negotiate some water as well. But the first day wasn't very old before the first action arrived on the scene. 2 Land Rovers got bogged down in tandem in the soft sand. And how do you recover 2 Land Rover Defenders that are stuck next to each other in soft sand? With 2 Land Rover Defenders, of course. Definitely not a Land Cruiser, Bucky, thank you. The 2 Defenders were soon extracted and the convoy continued east towards the Kruger. Although the sand presents a unique set of challenges, the rocks, which are hidden under the water in the rainy season, provide a tough challenge too. Hey, that's the Jeep Cherokee we featured last week, and owner Charles Murray is towing a trailer over the rocks. That's a little bit impressive. And determined that the Landies and Jeeps won't have all the airtime for themselves, our cruiser man has also joined the rock crawling fun. Slow and steady, he makes it through too. Finally, after a long day in the saddle, it was time to set up camp in the dry Letaba River. This is what makes overland adventures so amazing. Camping in the middle of the bush with not a person or politician in sight. Beautiful. Looks like an awesome trip, and most certainly the kind of trip we'd want to take our disco on someday when it's done. The Landy is slowly coming together now. With only weeks before the Discovery's big reveal at the Johannesburg International Motor Show, the pressure is on to finish on time. Meanwhile, the Landy is still with Dwayne Services in Pretoria, where the new dashboard is almost done. It seems as if Dwayne was, well, having a bit of a foam party, all by himself. So once the new foam surface has been smoothed over, the fiberglass sheet will follow, along with resin. And then finally, the Landy will go back to AK leather, where the new dash will be covered in a black vinyl trim.
After the dash has been shaped, take weaved fiberglass mat, work it in. So to take the shape, and then after you put the mat on, you just put fiberglass on it, wait for it to dry, and you can just work it off and shape it.
It's time to get serious and test the GWM against something that is exactly the same, but completely different. Really, it makes perfect sense. Both are turbo diesels and both have independent front suspensions, both have reverse cameras, both have leather seats, and they each have a 4x4 drivetrain, combined with limited ground clearance and, well, a pavement parking kind of image. The only real difference is the price. The GWM sells for 280,000 Rand, while the Infinity retails for just, well, for a bit more. Which is why we decided to do a test between the GWM H5 and this, the Infinity FX 30D S. Before we get down to the business of the comparison test, let's talk Infinity FX, because it is rather special in its own right. Infinity is for Nissan what Lexus is for Toyota, a premium brand with superior, well, everything. The FX is Infinity's sport SUV, and this particular version is fitted with Nissan's 3-litre V6 turbo diesel engine, and this is the top premium S derivative. The 3-litre V6 delivers 175 kilowatts of power and 550 newton meters of torque, and is coupled to a 7-speed automatic gearbox that sends the power permanently to all 4 wheels via an electronic 4x4 system. Looks-wise, the FX is one of those designs that polarize views. Some love it, while others don't. Whatever you think of it, it does seem to get noticed a lot, and that's probably what the designers aimed for. Especially the swoopy bonnet with its powerful bulges on the sides are not to everyone's liking, but overall we reckon it's a pretty fine looking machine. Besides the reverse camera and leather we mentioned before, the FX interior is fitted with just about any and all of the bells and whistles and electronic this and that you can imagine. It's really sporty with its paddle shift gearbox and plenty of horses, and it's sumptuously luxurious. Yet there is maybe just a tiny bit too much Nissan in here, which slightly muddles the super luxurious water. Infiniti currently sells about 10 FXs per month, which is kind of what they aim for. It's all very exclusive and very posh. Then again, at 780,000 Rand, that's kind of what you'd expect. Enough of the blah 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 yada yada fish-based stuff. Let's get down to business and see how this Infiniti will stack up against the GWM H5. As always, we've consulted with some, scientists and come up with some really scientific tests to be able to properly compare the H5 with the FX. So, to test number one then. Our first test is a very serious off-road driving test. And please guys, don't try and attempt this at your local shopping mall. It takes years of experience and practice. Okay, so the GWM has 175 millimeters of ground clearance and a 4x4 system that in high range locks the center diff and gives you a 50-50 split between the front and rear axles. Time to find out then if the H5 can still go some ways off-road or not. So 4x4 system engaged, first gear, an experienced 4x4 driver behind the wheel. Well, let's hold thumbs. So that was really impressive. The H5 scaled the pavement without any traction or ground clearance issues. So it certainly got the job done. Now, let's find out if the snazzy Infiniti can go where many other soft-roader 4x4s go every weekend. So, remember those low-profile tires. Low-profile tires. I'm seriously nervous. Okay. Oh my word. Actually got to the top. So the off-road challenge is a draw. Sometimes in the line of duty, you need to lay your life on the line. So it's time now, after we've already completed the urban off-road test, to do the more dangerous off-road test. This is one of the training obstacles at the Rhino Park complex. It's not exactly grade 10 obstacle, but no sedan will be happy here. So it's the perfect place then for two in-between 4x4s like the Infiniti and GWM. Amazingly, the FX, with its electronic 4x4 system that allocates power between the four wheels as required, makes it up and over the obstacle without incurring permanent damage. Although, I did have to adjust my approach a couple of times. Now it's time to see if the H5 can do it as well. With a fraction more engine revs to get around the turbo lag issue, the H5 goes up much easier than the Infiniti. Going down, the Chinese lorry's wheels don't lift nearly as easily as the FX's, and it makes it down without breaking much of a sweat. Although both softies completed the test successfully, you'd have to say the GWM had the Infiniti's number here. Practicality is very important for average Joe, so we need to test this aspect too. And for that purpose, I have, with the input of our highly skilled scientist, assembled an array of practical gear that a typical soft-roader SUV has to carry. So let's see if all of this stuff fits in here. Mom's bags, Dad's drinks, Kitty's toys. Of course, we also, at some stage, need to talk to each other. Yes, and there's even some space to spare. Practical features were probably not at the top of the FX's design brief, but let's see how it fares. Mom's overnight bag. Of course, don't forget Dad's drinks. I see a problem. Baby's back. Baby's toys. And of course, the need to talk. What? Guess I was wrong. Driving pleasure is an important sales pitch too. But as we said earlier in the program, driving pleasure is unfortunately not so high on the GWM H5's list of good points. On tar, it's not great, and ultimate refinement and dynamics are just, well, not there. But it's also not so bad. On dirt, the game changes completely. The GWM is not happy at all on dirt, and especially the tail likes to get a bit bouncy on you. There are no electronics in here. Remember to help you out when you run out of talent mid-corner. It's a whole different game in the FX's cabin. Here, it is super solid and super composed with an army of electronics looking after the driver. The 175 kilowatt engine, the auto gearbox with its paddle shifters, the sport-tuned suspension and the feel of the car. It's all very cool. It was loads of fun, man. You got no idea. So this test is a no-brainer. It's the 780,000 Rand Infinity that gets the nod here, no question. If money is not a problem, then the Infinity is probably not a bad call for 850,000 Rand. However, for 270,000 Rand, you get a whole lot of car here, guys. So is an extra 500,000 Rand really worth it? Personally, I don't think so. Well, folks, unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. And if you were wondering where Wim Hannes is, he's working very hard in the Kruger National Park. And I hope to see you all again next week. In the meantime, please keep left, pass right. Catch all the latest motoring news in Leisure Wheels magazine. If you want more information about that 4x4 show, find us on Facebook. There you will also find more information about that 4x4 trip in conjunction with Leisure Wheels magazine. That 4x4 show brought to you by Bridgestone, your journey, our passion.